Mia knelt in the damp grass, her fingers tracing the engraved letters on the headstone. Clara Bennett, beloved wife, teacher, friend. The marble was cold beneath her palm, but she pressed harder anyway, as if she could reach through the stone and say thank you one more time. She hadn't been back in nearly 3 years. Not since the funeral, when she stood in the back row with Emma bundled against her chest, too afraid to approach the family, too broken to explain what Clara had meant to her. But today was different. Today, Emma was in kindergarten, and Mia had a steady job at the bookstore downtown. Today, she could finally say the words she'd been carrying like stones in her chest. "I made it," she whispered. "We made it." The cemetery was quiet except for the rustle of oak leaves overhead. Mia didn't hear the footsteps until they stopped a few feet behind her. She would have loved knowing that. Mia turned sharply. A man stood there, maybe in his early 60s, with silver hair and tired eyes that looked like they cried too many tears to count. He wore a dark coat and held a small bouquet of white lilies. "I'm sorry," Mia stammered, rising quickly. "I didn't mean to intrude. I was just—" "You're not intruding." His voice was gentle, patient. "I'm David, Clara's husband." Mia's breath caught. She'd seen him from a distance at the funeral, surrounded by mourners, unreachable. Now he stood before her with a sad, curious smile. "You knew her," he said. It wasn't a question. Mia nodded slowly. "She saved my life." David's expression softened. He gestured to a nearby bench beneath the oak tree. "Would you tell me about it?" They sat together, and Mia's hands trembled as she began. She told him about the winter 4 years ago, when everything fell apart, how she'd lost her job, then her apartment, then her hope, how she'd been sleeping in her car with Emma, who was barely 2 years old, bundling her in every blanket they owned just to keep her warm through the freezing nights. "I was at the library one afternoon," Mia said quietly, "trying to keep Emma entertained so we could stay inside a little longer. Clara was there volunteering, in the children's section. She saw us. I don't know how, but she just knew." David listened without interrupting, his eyes fixed on her face. She didn't ask questions. She didn't make me feel small. She just smiled and said, "You look like you could use a warm meal." And she took us to a diner down the street. Mia's voice cracked. She bought us soup and sandwiches. Emma had hot chocolate. I remember watching her little hands wrapped around that mug, and I just started crying. Clara didn't say anything. She just reached across the table and held my hand. Mia wiped her eyes with the back of her sleeve. She helped us find a shelter. She brought us clothes, diapers, books for Emma. She visited us every week. And when I finally got a job and saved enough for a deposit, she co-signed the lease on our apartment. She didn't have to do any of it, but she did. David's jaw tightened, and he looked away, blinking hard. That sounded exactly like her. "I never got to thank her properly," Mia said. "By the time I had enough money to buy her flowers or take her to lunch, she was already sick. I came to the hospital once, but there were so many people, and I didn't want to take up her time. And then she was gone." David turned back to her, his expression raw. "She would have wanted to see you. She would have wanted to know how you were doing." "I'm doing okay now," Mia said softly. "Emma's in school. I have a job. We have a home. It's small, but it's ours. And it's all because of Clara." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then David stood and placed the lilies on Clara's grave. "She left behind a foundation," he said quietly. "A charity she started years ago to help families in crisis. I've been trying to keep it going, but it's hard. I'm not as good at it as she was." He looked at Mia with something fragile and hopeful in his eyes. "Would you be interested in helping? We need someone who understands what it's like. Someone who's been there." Mia blinked in surprise. "I don't have any experience with nonprofits." "You have experience surviving," David said. "That's what matters." 3 weeks later, Mia and Emma moved into the small guest house on David's property. It was temporary, he'd said, just until she got settled into her new role at the foundation. But the guest house was bigger than their old apartment, with a backyard where Emma could play and windows that let in sunlight like hope. David was kind in a quiet, careful way. He gave them space but checked in every evening, often bringing dinner or a board game for Emma. He never asked for anything in return. He just seemed grateful for the company. Emma adored him. She called him Mr. David and showed him every drawing she made at school. He listened to her endless stories with the same patience Clara must have shown countless children over the years. And slowly, carefully, something like a family began to form. But one evening, everything shifted. Mia was in the kitchen making tea when she heard voices outside. David was talking to someone on the front porch. The conversation sounded tense. She moved to the window and saw a woman in her 50s, elegantly dressed, with sharp eyes and a tight expression. You don't know anything about her, the woman was saying. She could be anyone, David. Isabel, please, David said quietly. This isn't. Clara would want me to protect you. Isabel's voice was firm. And I'm telling you, someone's been asking questions. Someone from your past. Mia's stomach tightened. She stepped back from the window, her heart racing. That night, David knocked on the guest house door. Mia opened it cautiously, and he stood there looking older than she'd ever seen him. I need to tell you something, he said. They sat at her small kitchen table, and David folded his hands in front of him like he was bracing for impact. Before I met Clara, I made mistakes. Big ones. I was involved in a business deal that hurt people. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. And I've spent the last 20 years trying to make up for it. Mia listened, her chest tight. Someone from that time has been looking for me. David continued. I don't know what they want. Maybe closure. Maybe revenge. But Isabel thinks they might use you or Emma to get to me. And I couldn't live with myself if that happened. Mia's hands trembled. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I wanted to believe it was over, David said quietly. And because I didn't want to lose this. He gestured around the small, warm room. I didn't want to lose the feeling of having a family again. Mia swallowed hard. She thought about packing up, about running again, about protecting Emma the way she always had. But then she looked at David's tired, honest face, and she thought about Clara, about the way Clara had reached across a diner table and held her hand without asking for anything in return. I'm not leaving, Mia said softly, but I need you to be honest with me from now on, about everything. David's eyes filled with tears. I promise. Over the next few weeks, they worked together to navigate the uncertainty. Isabel helped them hire security. David met with lawyers and sorted through old documents. And Mia learned the full truth about the man who had opened his home to her. He wasn't perfect, but neither was she. And maybe that was the point. One evening, as Emma played in the backyard in the sunset in shades of gold and rose, Mia found David sitting on the porch with a photo album open in his lap. It was filled with pictures of Clara, smiling, laughing, surrounded by people she'd helped. She would have liked you, David said quietly. I think she did, Mia replied, sitting beside him. David closed the album and looked out at Emma, who was spinning in circles with her arms outstretched. Thank you for staying. Thank you for letting us, Mia said. They sat together in comfortable silence, two broken people learning to be whole again. And somewhere Mia thought Clara was smiling.